Hello and welcome. It's great to have all of you here today. Today is a special day because we're going to talk about how your organization can reach results and momentum like they never have before. And we're going to do that by introducing the Infinite Habits architecture. We're going to do so by talking about the core transformation sequence. There are 5 components of the core transformation sequence, and in each of these 5 steps, you will see what it takes and learn what an organization and team needs to truly accomplish not only transformation, but to accomplish what they're truly capable of achieving. My name is Broadwater. I am the founder and the author of the Infinite Habits architecture. I've had the opportunity to work with organizations now for 25 years. I've worked with organizations that are large, that are small. We've helped individuals, teams, CEOs, executive members, and executive teams to get unstuck, get out of their way, and get incredible results. What's interesting to me is that there truly is an architecture of success. There are patterns of success, and there are patterns of failure. Today we're going to talk about an operating system, not one for a computer or for electronics. This is an organizational, even could be used in our personal lives, an operating system for high performance alignment. Alignment to what? Alignment to our goals, alignment to our objectives, alignment to the things that truly matter to us. In relation to an organization, it's alignment to the strategic objectives. So let's dive in. The first thing we're going to talk about is the silent killer of performance. And that is that all effort does not equal results. In other words, unanchored effort is drift. Unanchored effort is when we're spinning our wheels. People can actually work harder and not get better results. It is important that we recognize this. There's this thing called drift mode, and it's a mindset. This drift mode is also a state of being, right? This can be a state of being in an organization. It can be a state of being in an individual. It can be a state of being in an executive team. It is the reactive state where activity stays high, but direction becomes unstable. Here's the illusion. Drift is misdirected effort disguised as progress. You don't solve drift by pushing harder. You solve it by aligning your effort. What does that mean? This is a ship. This orange part is the spine, or known as the keel. An aircraft carrier or battleship has a spine. In fact, the entire structure of the ship is built upon the very first component that's laid down, and that is the spine, also known as the keel. This mechanical architecture is not only within ships, but it is also in our lives. We all have a spine within the organization. What's interesting about a ship is the mechanical architecture of a spine is literally this part of the ship is what makes it so the ship doesn't drift sideways. That spine sticks down and actually creates grip in the water. So when there's thrust or propulsion added, or in a sailboat, when the wind blows, it actually creates the lateral resistance so that the ship can go straight forward. For example, my family. I have 5 kids and I've been married for 25 years. It's been an incredible ride. But I'll tell you what's an incredible ride is when we go out in our kayaks. We have 2 kayaks, and these 2 kayaks have a spine. Some kayaks don't. And if you get into one of the kayaks that don't, if you paddle on one side or the other, you actually spin. If you paddle, you actually slide all over the place. But in our kayaks, they're these red long kayaks with a very clear spine in them because it comes down to a pretty significant point that comes down maybe 4 inches underneath you. When you paddle, it's hard to even turn it. When you paddle on one side, you'll just sit there and go mostly straight because of that spine. The same is true in our organizations. When we have the correct foundation, then we are able to maintain course. We're able to set a course and maintain it. The reason why a lot of organizations and even in executive teams, even individuals in their lives, the reason why some drift is because they unknowingly don't have the right foundation. They don't have a spine. Now, the cost of drift in the marketplace in organizations is $8.8 trillion annually. That's in lost global productivity. That's 9% of global GDP. Now, beyond the 8.8 trillion, there's 438 billion lost to disengagement in 2024 alone. What's the diagnosis? We are applying massive effort to a ship that has no keel, no spine. Highly aligned organizations that have a spine grow revenue. This is what we found in the research, in the data from organizations using the Infinite Habits architecture. Highly aligned organizations grow revenue 58% faster and are 72% more profitable than misaligned peers. The failure is not lack of hustle. The failure is the loss of structural alignment. It's the illusion of busyness. We can be spinning our wheels in a very literal way out there. Now, here's the anatomy of drift. We've talked about this drift. There are 4 components of drift. This is the drift spiral. And these 4 stages of drift are what occurs in an individual, in a team, in an organization. And if not identified and remedied, it can literally lead to the disengagement of the members in the organizations. So here's the anatomy of the drift spiral. Number 1, it starts with distraction. It's when our attention is pulled, the priority is interrupted. You can think of something as simple as personal fitness for an individual's lives. They get distracted, they do something else other than sticking with the plan, right? Exercise maybe 30 minutes a day, and instead they get distracted doing something else. In an organization, this can be deadly because stage 1 is distraction. What comes next is delay. Postponement becomes the pattern. Later is the default. When this starts to become not only a personal pattern, but it can also become a culture. And if this becomes the culture, then we know we are on our way to stage 3 in the drift spiral, and that is disappointment. This is when self-trust drops and the narrative of I keep failing starts to grow. Now we're in a dangerous place. The anatomy of the drift spiral starts with distraction. It's step 2 is delay, and then we enter into disappointment. If not remedied, then we will enter into disengagement. This is when the spine gets broken within an individual or organization. The commitment collapses, people mentally check out, and they check out for a reason. They check out to avoid the pain of underperformance. The drift spiral has these 4 stages, and the good news is this. We can recover at any time during this. And when trained, the secret is to recognize distraction at the top of the drift spiral and get out of drift. So what do you do about it? What can we do about distraction, delay, disappointment, disengagement, all of these things that can eat away and spiral us away from our goals and our objectives and the things that we're really capable of accomplishing? Well, it all starts with understanding. What must we understand? The first thing we need to understand is how to change behavior, but it's interesting. I want you to ponder this quote. Here's the quote. Understanding identity changes behavior faster than understanding behavior. In the infinite habits architecture, we start with identity. We know that if there's a behavior change that is desired, if we want to change, the fastest way to change is to understand identity, not necessarily go study behavior and more behavior and more behavior. We're talking about results. And if we want results, we're going to understand identity, shift the identity, and then that's going to change behavior faster than the actual understanding of behavior. Said in another way, infinite habits do not form in the mind. They form in the identity. To fix the outcome, to reach our goals, we must first build upon the structural foundation of identity. So let's talk about that. The core transformation sequence includes 5 steps. This is the infinite habits architecture at a high level. Notice how it starts with identity. They're called identity anchors. There are 3 of them that we need to embed into our lives and organizations and teams if we want to truly create the highest transformation, the highest outcome that we're capable of achieving. Once we put these identity anchors down, we lay the spine of the ship. We lay the spine of the team. We lay the spine of the organization. We lay the spine of the individual so they can truly reach their highest potential. Now, stage 2 of the core transformation sequence is mindset. So after we lay down the identity anchors, then we recognize and identify the mindset, drift mode or alignment mode. Once identified, now then we can choose. But in order to choose, we first need to understand what is drift mode and what is alignment mode. After we get the identity and mindset in place, then we fire up the engines. Then we fuel the engines. In the infinite habits architecture, we have 12 performance systems. These are the engines. We call them modules. These are training modules. And once implemented on a team, then suddenly what can occur is momentum. This is when consistency can occur. This is when consistency compounds. After momentum in the core transformation sequence comes stage 5. And that's called infinite impact. This is results. This is the mode when results come and infinite impact is so huge that people inside the organization can feel it as well as outside the organization. Let's look at this from a different perspective. We're going to look at the same 5 core transformation sequence steps with a different slide. This is the core architecture of high performance: identity, mindset, engines, momentum, and impact, in this order. You can't switch it up. You can't lose one without losing the entire sequence. Notice how it all starts with identity. I want to share with you a visual. When building a ship, it all starts with the identity spine. When in the infinite habits architecture, this is what needs to be in place in order to start a true transformation. Now, in the identity spine, there are 3 components. We have ownership and stewardship. We have growth, which means you're also coachable. And we have leadership. And the kind of leadership we're talking about is leadership that includes service. It's leadership when the leader is able to get outside themselves and look at the needs of others and their organization. Let's talk about each one of these identity anchors. Anchor number 1 is ownership. This is taking total captaincy of your results by managing the small things with excellence. Another word that we use for anchor number 1 is stewardship. That is stewardship of the small things. There's a well-known organization, and this is an organization that the entire world would recognize, a very popular and successful company. While interviewing one of the employees, the question was asked, "Are you writing an email? What are you doing right here?" And they said, "I'm working writing an email, but I'm not writing an email. I'm changing the world." That was an example of an employee with the ownership and stewardship identity anchor properly in place. They understood that the simple act of writing an email could change the world. It was connected to the bigger goals and outcomes of the organization. It is so important that small tasks are done with excellence. And when a culture and a community is trained with the identity that by small things, big things come, by excellence, by stewarding the small opportunities, whether it's writing an email or working on a 90-minute project, even though it might feel tough and maybe sometimes impossible to move the needle with the end goal. By training a team that by small things, the big things are accomplished, then suddenly this excellence and focus on the small things becomes the pathway that is doable and exciting for individuals because they focus on how they go about each project instead of what they're doing with each project. Identity anchor number 1 is all about taking ownership, and without a community that takes ownership, you can find symptoms of this identity anchor not in place, and that's when you get organizations and teams playing the blame game. And that creates a lot of unnecessary effort and friction in the process of moving forward. Let's talk about identity anchor number 2. This is growth. Growth needs coachability. This is where we're able to prioritize the lesson over personal image, so we can expand each individual's capacity for the mission. Growth and coachability help people to truly be their best. One of the things that we've discovered in organizations is that if we have people willing to get the lesson, willing to ask the question, what am I missing? We have found a doubling of performance, because the alternative, which creates a huge drag in momentum, is when people are scared or they avoid curiosity. And when that occurs, people are starting to protect image and drift mode sets in. Let's talk about anchor number 3. Anchor number 3 is leadership. The reality is this: to bring out the best in an individual, executive team, an organization, even right down to a new employee, training in leadership and showing them how to lead with the servant mindset, which means focusing on how they can empower others, focusing on listening, letting people know the path to true leadership and promotion. This can make all the difference to create a bright future for each individual on the team, but it can also create an incredible leader that is able to not only stabilize the fleet, they can prioritize objectives, but they also exemplify being able to get outside their comfort zones and even maybe their reputation to do what's best for the organization. This might mean, when I say reputation, it might mean admitting that you're wrong sometimes, being open to being wrong. And ironically, that ends up elevating one's reputation because they're a teachable leader. And people feel like they're a leader that will go to the end of the earth for them. It's important that leadership is looked at as service. And servant leadership, when implemented correctly, can have an incredible impact in an organization. That's identity anchor number 3. Now, step 2 in the core transformation sequence is shifting the mindset. With the identity spine anchored, you can now fix the course. This is the transition from reactive survival to strategic alignment to our goals. The goal is to stop protecting your image and start chasing the objectives. The goal is to get out of drift mode and enter into what we call alignment mode. Let's take a few minutes and talk about the difference between drift mode and alignment mode. And I want to ask you a question as we're going through these. Where are you operating? Where is your team operating? Where do you see others operating? Well, let's talk about drift mode. The primary focus of drift mode is image protection. The primary focus for alignment mode is the objective. The internal feeling of drift mode is anxiety and defensiveness. The internal feeling of alignment mode is coachable confidence. Who would you rather spend time with? Someone who's coachable and confident, or somebody who's in anxiety and defensiveness? This drift mode takes a lot of energy to be around, to be in ourselves. Now, there's more. The response to failure in drift mode is blame and excuses. The response to failure in alignment mode is asking what's the lesson and looking for an audit. Let's look strategically. What happened here? Let's get our lessons so we don't repeat. If you make a mistake, get the lesson and try again. The last symptom of drift mode we're going to talk about is this operational state. It's high drag and ego friction. There's so much energy being spent managing people's ego. And the reality is that if that's the case, then you have multiple people or one or more people in this drift mode, and it takes a lot of energy and it creates a lot of drag, a lot of resistance in the momentum of a team or organization. Now, in alignment mode, the operational state is streamlined performance. In sports, it's called a runner's high, right? You have runners and they get going, and there's a point when they reach this runner's high where they can't feel the challenges and resistance anymore. It just feels good to run. And that's what happens in this alignment mode where there's this streamlined performance. It feels great being on a team that is in alignment mode. It feels great for ourselves as individuals when we're in alignment mode because life feels like we can do it. Our objectives feel attainable. We're able to stay on track. We're able to stay focused, and we're far from this distracted, delayed state of the drift spiral. So my question for you is, where are you and your team operating? In drift mode or alignment mode? So here's a drift check. Does my current effort have forward direction, or am I slipping into distraction and unanchored busyness? Unanchored busyness, right? Drift mode is misdirected effort disguised as progress, where alignment mode is anchored effort that compounds. Now, if I had a choice between drift and alignment, I know which one I would choose. I think most people know as well. Alignment mode is where we can truly have effort that translates into positive results. We're able to achieve the outcomes we desire. But that doesn't happen in drift mode when we're distracted and in delay. It only happens in alignment mode where we have anchored effort that compounds. Now we're going to focus on stage 3 of the core transformation sequence. This is the engine of the core transformation sequence. We call this the performance system. And these are the modules that have the components that make up all the difference to create massive power, transfer the power, get the rubber to meet the road, and to fuel all the results that you want in your life. These 12 modules or engines have components. We have number 1, the engine itself, right up here. Number 2, we have the drive shaft. And then 3, we have the propeller. This is where the propulsion, or in a car, the rubber meets the road. Now, the engine is fueled by these things called microactions, and we're going to talk about those. Microactions are the fuel of the engine. However, a very important part of an engine is the drive shaft. The drive shaft is what transfers the power to the propeller in the water. In a car, it transfers the power to the tires where the rubber meets the road. Now, this drive shaft is absolutely critical in an organization because it transfers the power of what each individual and team is capable of to the actual end result of achieving objectives, reaching goals. And this drive shaft in our training is, there's 12 engines, right? And each engine has a drive shaft, and these involve core virtues. If these are cracked in an individual on the team, then what happens is the internal integrity of each team member is jeopardized, and that means the engine cannot transfer power to the prop. That's a problem. Now, an example of this drive shaft, what we call core virtues in individuals, is valiance. Now, this is module number 7. We're going to dive into module number 7 and give you an example of what the power of a core virtue and why this integrity of a drive shaft is so important, so that that power of the engine can be transferred to the propeller. So valiant, let's look at this drive shaft. If you have an individual or team that is valiant, they will do things that other teams will not. So for example, there are 3 approaches and only one of them is valiant. The first approach is those who make excuses. These are the excuse makers. They ask the question, why me, when asked to do a task? Then you have the second type of person that are honorable. Now, honorables are those who do what they're told, but they don't do anymore. Well, they'll do what they're told to do, and that's what they do, and that's their job. However, an individual and team that is valiant and that properly places this drive shaft in the organization and in their personal approach each day, while doing the task, if they recognize something that maybe needs a remedy or that's out of place, an honorable won't do anything about it because they weren't asked. A valiant individual, if they see something out of place, they'll either fix it or they'll bring to awareness what needs to be fixed to the right person in the organization. They won't just leave it alone. And the same thing's true with an opportunity. The valiant will see an opportunity to make something better, and they will do it because they're valiant. An honorable won't do it because it's not their job and nobody asked them to do it. When you have an organization with valiant individuals, then what happens is it brings to life the organization. Installing drive shafts in an organization can create integrity in ways that the engine can operate smoother, it can last longer, we'll have more retention with employees, and when it'll have a lot less friction within the system. Now, the next component, that's the drive shaft, the core virtues. The next thing that is in this engine example is the propeller. This is where the prop meets the water, and the actual spinning of this prop, the mechanical design, creates thrust. These are the performance principles within each of the 12 modules. And lastly, we have these micro actions, and these micro actions are the fuel for the engine. We're going to talk more about those. Let's talk about micro actions. We don't do habits, we trigger them. Micro actions are the tiny specific steps that move you from drift into alignment mode. What are micro actions? Micro actions are actions that are small enough to be realistic even on a bad day. They're executed in real life, not just discussed in theory. They're clear enough so you know immediately if you did it, and they're always tied directly to an identity anchor and a specific module. Within the 12 module architecture of Infinite Habits, each module, each engine has a micro action that fuels that engine. Without micro actions, you don't have proper and consistent fuel to create the momentum and the thrust that is necessary to achieve the objectives. Let me give you an example. In this illustration, you can see this wheel that represents the objective and this smaller wheel that turns upon it. Now, what's interesting about micro actions is that this is a small wheel representing the micro actions. How much force does it take to spin this little wheel compared to spinning the big wheel? If you've ever gone up and touched one of these type of gears, to move one of these big gears, it takes a monumental effort compared to the smaller wheel. You can almost spin these smaller wheels without effort, very little effort, and then the big wheel moves very slowly as this little wheel spins. That's how micro actions work within the engines of these modules. It's incredible, it's predictable, and it helps to get results. Now let's talk a little bit more about these modules. The modules are performance systems, and these 12 modules are performance systems, and when installed into an individual or teams within organizations, suddenly the performance goes through the roof. Component number 1 has a principle. It's a mechanical rule for success. Component number 2 is the drive shaft we talked about. This is the internal character trait that provides integrity, and we talked about valiance. And then we have the fuel, the micro actions. This is the smallest step that fuels the entire engine. The modules, the 12 modules, are a performance system, and when implemented in a team or organization, performance goes through the roof. The 12 performance modules, or engines that we call them, include stewardship, performance, and impact. These are three categories of modules that we train on. The stewardship modules are all about resource management. The performance modules are all about precision tuning, and the impact modules are all about influence and syndication, such as communication and signal training. We train about presence and connection. This is a module that when we train on it, people find value within the organization, but people have reported back that their home lives and their personal relationships have changed significantly because of the power of this training. We have synergy and partnership and how to go about that, as well as legacy and impact. Each one of the 12 modules, performance systems, have an engine and these three engine rooms or categories that we train on. It's incredible, it creates results, and every organization that implements these has seen dramatic increases in revenue, has in employee satisfaction, employee retention, and the ability to accomplish the strategic objectives and even personal goals that people have set. Step 4 in the core transformation sequence is momentum. It's the ability to generate momentum. So we have identity spine down. We have the mindset set. We have the 12 modules, performance systems engaged. Those are the engines. Then what comes next is stage 4, which is momentum. Momentum is consistency compounded. It's the accelerating force created by these modules, these engines that are running through micro actions in alignment mode. So you'll notice here we have micro action, micro action, micro action. These are all happening in alignment mode. And what happens, this is what happens when the drive shaft is intact and the fuel, the micro actions, is applied consistently. What happens is the result goes up. Aligned behavior becomes easier, more automatic. The internal friction disappears. Amateurs will chase wins, but masters understand that stewarding the small steps is what creates momentum. And that is stage 4 of the core transformation sequence. And what happens in this momentum stage is the acceleration of compounded consistency, or consistency compounded, shows up everywhere. There's rising clarity and growing confidence. There's lower internal resistance and friction, and aligned behavior becomes almost automatic and it feels great. Listen to this. Momentum is the accelerating force created by the 12 modules running through micro actions in alignment mode. You don't reach results. You steward the process. That's the idea. I'll say it again. You don't reach for the results. You steward the process until the results are inevitable. And that's what occurs in stage 4 of the core transformation sequence in the infinite habits architecture. Now, stage 5 is infinite impact. In infinite impact, you start to create impact. You start to create waves in 3 specific areas. Number 1 is its compounding financial and tangible assets. If that's one of your goals, you will see that showing up in infinite impact mode. Now, the second thing you'll show up is performance and psychological ease. It's the flow. And the third thing you'll show up is influence, the relational speed and cultural momentum that stabilizes everyone in your wake. In infinite impact mode, influence is the natural byproduct. Clients love to be a part of it. Employees, these are the type of companies that people love to work for. And this is what happens in infinite impact mode. Infinite impact is stage 5 of the core transformation sequence. And infinite impact is the compounding of anchored effort over time. When you use the infinite habits architecture, you will enter into this infinite impact mode. And the results are measurable. Infinite impact is the inevitable output of a mechanically sound system. As you implement the infinite habits architecture, as you take the 5 steps contained within the core transformational sequence, what you're going to notice, you'll be able to own your drift, anchor your identity, take this next small step. You'll know which micro actions create the results, and then you can trust the compounding. Results are on their way. It's part of the mechanics of the system. Installing the architecture for infinite impact is what's going to occur within your team, your organization, even within individual lives with the infinite habits architecture. And what it's doing is we're laying down that spine, as we've talked about, so that we can build a beautiful structure to create the thrust, to power the engines, and ultimately streamline the momentum forward so that we can achieve not only momentum but infinite impact, where we get the results that our teams are capable of having. My challenge for you is to stop sliding and start moving. Get out of drift mode and get you and your team more into alignment mode than you've ever been before. And you can do so by discovering exactly where your organization is leaking power and sliding off course. At infinitehabits.com, you can take the drift mode assessment. This is a free assessment. You can choose to take it for your organization or for you as an individual. And what's great about it is it can do a diagnostic scan to better shine the light on this drift mode and where it might be showing up. It might be sneaking in within your life or your organization. And then what you can do after you take the assessment is you're invited to schedule a consultation with one of our master trainers. You're also invited to a 2-day structural training. This is a training that can be in-house at your company, or you can send some representatives or yourself to the live event that we put on. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you. Good luck. And I can't wait for you to experience life when drift mode is more recognized and alignment mode is there for the taking, where you can anchor your identity, start and fire up and fuel those engines, and create momentum that leads to infinite impact that you've always been capable of doing, that your organization has potential to truly accomplish. And that's what we're about here at Infinite Habits, is helping individuals, teams, and organizations to accomplish their highest potential. Have an amazing day, and if you have any questions, please hop online, you can message us, you can give us a call, and we'd be happy to help you and your team get to the next level. Have a great day.